inflation unless the circulation increases. What's happening is we're paying more out than, look at your own income and your own expenses. When you count for every cent that you're spending, how much of it is actually going to interest and principal on someone else's debt, which has been multiplied to these terminal proportions, is phenomenal. We don't have room to squeak by any longer, and so we don't really have time to ignore the facts. And I mean, truth of the matter is, I'm originally from California, and I moved to West Marin County, in the early '70s, and there's people there that call me the president. It's sort of a joking respect, because I was solving the world's problems back then. Yeah. But people used to meet me and even congregate in huge groups. At a bar, a couple might come in and see. There was a rock and roll bar that I would go to. Friends, worked there and all, and it was a casual, laid-back place. But it was a major music place, and people would come in. I mean, this happened, more often than I can tell you. Where, a couple would come in and they'd buy a couple of drinks and ended up being in a conversation about mathematically perfected economy, and you wouldn't even know it. And then 2 carloads of other people came in, and they were with this couple, and they insisted all these people come over and join in on this fascinating conversation. And I'm not kidding you; huge groups of people would accumulate in these ways regularly.
Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah. And in fact, I would meet people 10, 15 years later who had just met me one time and go, oh, and they'd come clear across the room, and I go, who the hell is this? And they'd come rushing up to me in a restaurant or something, and you're the guy, and they would thank me and recall how they could never forget that presentation. But one time I was talking to, I'm not kidding, about over 100 people who were gathering for a rock and roll concert, which was going to happen a few hours down the road. People were collecting early, and all these people amassed and around an original conversation like this. And in the middle of this, a teacher at this little school, it's a 2-room school, which is kindergarten through 8th grade. And so half the students are in one class and half the students are in the other class. It's all these other grades, together. And it's, 10 children in each classroom, something like that. And 2 teachers in a building built around 1870. And perfectly straight to this day. Lovely. It was well kept at the time. Imagine it still is, because it's a historic landmark, really a beautiful one. Anyway, one of the people who's listening to me and a couple other people started chatting off to the side, and one of them interrupts me to ask me something. We were talking about how adults believe they already understand all this, and they're wrong. I can't tell you how many times people have, walked away and denied that money could possibly be created in the manner that it is. And you ask them how it is created, and of course they haven't the slightest idea, but they just can't believe, this fact of this obfuscation of the currency. So these people,
seems like it would be considered. I mean, it would have to be illegal, but if that were the case, a credit card would be illegal, and an adjustable rate mortgage would be illegal. It's all usury.
Well, it is all usury, and it's interesting to see everybody talking about this. I mean, when I wrote this paper, Interest is Usury, it was just one of the essays that I provided every president, and right. I published it in 1979, and it's been in my material that's been online ever since 1984. And, now it's pretty much commonly said, but like I say, this guy claims that I'm right, and then I ask him, okay, so if they don't launder the principal into their possession, how much interest would it take to multiply debt into terminal debt? And you see, so people don't really get the math yet,
or even the fundamentals of fractional reserve banking, the logic that goes back to
the fractional reserve, like I say, is a consequence. You really need to keep that in the
terminology straight.
Well, it's not the terminology. You're right in calling it fractional reserve. What's wrong is to assume that it has an importance that it doesn't. That is, it's just like putting a ceiling on federal debt. It can't be done without fixing the economy. Neither can you avoid a fractional reserve, resorting to a fractional reserve policy from an original precious metal monetary standard, which was the transition that we suffered. And the reason is likewise. There's two reasons really, and the first one's even more important and simple to realize, and that is if you restrict the circulation to just M for monetary reserves, and industry equals M, so that our production equals M, so we have all the circulation that we need to convey all wealth in one immediate transaction at one time, we're fine. As soon as industry grows above that, there you have the circle of 1,000 people where we took $5 from every fifth person. You see, you don't have enough circulation to sustain all possible commerce.
Okay.
Now, another thing, injustice that you're suffering is when you evaluate the situation around the circle, you find that every fifth person also has been deprived of so much circulation as would have represented their production. And that's another injustice, you see. So
this is where you need to be able to teach a class on this to get people to really get to follow.
People have been saying that since I was 30 years old. You
know?
And, you want to have a good joke on yourself? Pretend you're me. Take my credentials, a proof of inevitable failure and singular solution. One actual economy, the original architect of the one fact of actual economy, and you try and find yourself a job at any university in this goddamn country.
Yeah,
They teach the lie of economics at that university, and that's the only lie they're going to be teaching.
They want you to teach Bretton Woods.
I can't even get published.
Oh, I see.
Too
radical, huh?
Well, there's nothing radical about it. It's like Thomas Jefferson was radical if he said if the American people ever allow the banks to issue their currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations which will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake homeless on the continent their fathers we conquered.
We have the quote in the site, many quotes from Jefferson, but that's one of the also the fact
that comes from my material, and as preserved from Jacques Walker's presentation, and according to academia, Jefferson never said that, and I know that Mr. Walker there's not a sign of his material anywhere, so
certainly accurate.
Well, it is. It is certainly accurate. But what I'm saying is, it comes from my work, wrongly. I preserved a lie in it, and
you've been pretty much dealt a bad deal as far as accreditation. Didn't you copyright your material?
Oh, there's never been any of my material ever produced which isn't copyrighted. None.
And so, aren't these people liable?
Well, sure they are. But that's what Ellen Hodgson Brown is a lawyer, and what lawyers know is that that processing something like that is extremely
expensive.
It's expensive, it's time consuming, and the truth of the matter is, if this is a just world, they will reward me someday, because I don't care who you look at. Stevens Arlinga, Bill Stills, Ellen Hodgson Brown, Ron Paul, Edwin Vieira, G. Edward Griffin, who's changed his position on interest in 180 degrees in 2 years because an article that I've had online about him for years, invalidating his attempt to disprove my thesis of inevitable failure. He's saying interest. He was saying through 2008, through the 2008 presidential campaign, that interest doesn't multiply debt in proportion to a circulation. Now he's come out with a competing solution. So stupid, he doesn't recognize, hey, when this guy says singular solution, he means it, and everyone else is wrong. When I was in high school math, believe me, I was in college algebra in the beginning of the second grade,
Right.
And, a guy who can prove the Pythagorean theorem right off the top of his head is not a guy to argue about basic arithmetic with,
Right. Absolutely. That's why we're so glad to have you on. You know what? We just got a few more minutes left. I'm going to close up my mouth and have you wind up and say you're maybe maybe give some kind of a brief outlook at our immediate situation, how you would propose enacting and through what kind of legislation would we solve our situation in a general terms?
Well,
in a few minutes.
In effect, I've spent 42 years resolving not just a fact of solution, that is monetary solution, mathematically perfected economy, which none of these plagiarists, although all of them have proposed alternate solutions, none of them can prove theirs is a solution. As opposed to mine, and the fact is that it was first formally published in 1979. None of these guys can even come close to that, and I was talking about it, profusely for 10 years prior to that, so that the arguments attracted people halfway across the country or world who were phenomenal mathematicians. It attracted their interest and reverence and respect, the fact of mathematically perfected economy long preceded all these 11th hour plagiarists who are attempting to cash in on this and are so dividing us from the visibility of one solution.
If you could if you could hold the attention of Alan Greenspan, Ben Bernanke, Geithner, Larry Summers, Paul Volcker, if you had them in a room, would there be 10 points that you'd make, 10 points? What would be the immediate points if you were the president, suddenly had the power to force, or if they were no longer
I'd probably only make
Federal Reserve?
I see no point in that. And in fact,
exercise.
Any of those people would be the last people, each and every one of them would be the last person in the world who would ever want to be found in a room with me, especially if, the 2 points I would make is this is a Bowie knife and this is how you gut a cow.
Okay, that's I'm curious what we're talking about.
That's a figure of speech, a metaphor.
Right.
So it sounds violent as if I'm violent, and I'm absolutely not. But the thing, unless you hit me.
Well, you're going to defend yourself. No, I was hoping
I'm
that
not a good.
was
I'm definitely not a good guy to hit. But the thing is, those aren't the people to go to for solution. You're wasting your time.
Where would we start digging out from this thing if you had the power? If somehow Superman suddenly you got a cape, what would you do tomorrow morning?
I would do what I've done this evening. I would talk to you, and
right.
I know that you're going to be spreading the word. And the fact of the matter is, there is no power. So let's just say that there is not a political candidate who is going to serve you. Dennis Kucinich, Ron Paul, whoever, they are not going to serve you. Now, on the other hand, people are literally even pleading with me for the last 2 years, have been pleading with me to run for president, pleading, and with very persuasive appeals. But here's the thing. What did we learn from Kennedy? We don't even know how